Yeah, I should be done in a minute, right?
Yeah. Okay, got 45 seconds, go.
Yeah, we can do this, totally. Hi, everybody. I'm Meredith Melendez. I'm with Rutgers Cooperative Extension. I'm part of the On-Farm Readiness Review Development Team, which is through NASDA, and I coordinate the post-farm visit survey. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we have seen so far with this survey. So thanks to everyone who's using the survey, because this is a reflection of the information that you're putting in there. So far, just in terms of trainings, we've done 30 readiness review trainings nationally. When we look at who's attending those trainings, we've got about 25 FDA personnel who have attended, about 230 state regulators, and about 200 extension educators who have attended. When we look at who's using the survey, we've got 44 states currently using it. And in the Northeast, we've got 10 states that have had it plugged into the system and started entering in surveys. When we look at the farms in the Northeast who have offered to have this voluntary readiness review conducted, we're at 583 farms, which when we look at the total number of farms that were estimated by NAS data, we're at about 10% participation. So in terms of voluntary, right, a farmer raising their hand and saying, yes, please come out and evaluate me, I personally think that's pretty good. When we look at the size of the operation based on acreage, we're about half, or a little bit more than half of are over 70 acres in size, but decent buy-in from the really small operations too. When we look at the farm's participation based on their produce sales, you can see those that needed to be in compliance the earliest with the regulation have had the most buy-in for participating with readiness review at 45%. But there's also been good participation for those that are considered covered by the regulation. When we look at the comparison of the numbers that are estimated by size for compliance with the rule, so again, this is using that NAS data, which we know, right, when we think about individual states, we know there's some disagreement with those numbers, so this is all ballpark. When we look at the largest of operations that participated, we're at about 28%. So the farms that are going to be up for inspection this season, we're at 18%, and the very small operations at 5%. Some people are using the survey and indicating if the farm is exempt. Usually that's in one of those other boxes. People are typing that in. It's hard to quantify that just because not everybody's using the survey in that way. But based on sales, we do know that that farms that are exempt are also participating. So that skews the numbers a little bit. But again, it's different for every farm. It might be a new operation that's sizing up, and so they might not be exempt the following year. So we're doing the best we can with the numbers. When we look at the priorities for improvement, at the smaller farm range, which was 207 farms for the Northeast that completed the survey, the priority was the pre-harvest worker training. Second in line was pre-harvest sanitation, then pre-harvest water, then post-harvest sanitation, but all relatively similar numbers there, so all equally important for this category. When I looked at the deficiencies for all of those categories, the lack of pre-harvest worker training records was number one out of all those categories. So this is a theme you'll notice. The records is an issue. And again, like Gretchen said, the resources exist for this. The resource that isn't there, I think, for a lot of these farms is someone to sit down and take the time to write it down. And that's obviously something we can't provide for them. But so if you're bringing a copy of the required records PSA document, PSA document, that's a great opportunity to give that to them. A lot of the growers that we've been interacting with in New Jersey weren't familiar with it, I think because sometimes we're throwing so much stuff at them at a training, they miss it. Number two for the deficiencies was inadequate record keeping of post-harvest cleaning and sanitizing. Number three was lack of pre-harvest water testing results. Number four was lack of water system inspection, and number five was inadequate cleaning and sanitizing of pre-harvest equipment. When we look at the $250,000 to $500,000 in sales, this represented 90 farms for the Northeast. Number one was post-harvest sanitation, two was health and hygiene, and three was harvest sanitation. When we look at the deficiencies, inadequate record keeping of post-harvest cleaning and sanitizing practices. Number 2 was inadequate or missing records of worker health and hygiene training. Number 3 was inadequate or missing visitor notifications. Number 4 was inadequate record keeping of post-harvest cleaning and sanitation. And number 5 was inadequate frequency of post-harvest cleaning and sanitation. So post-harvest really showed up with this group with the deficiencies. For the largest of the operations with over $500,000 in produce sales, which was 262 of our farms, post-harvest sanitation was number 1 here, health and hygiene number 2, and harvest sanitation 3. The top 5 deficiencies, here we are with inadequate record keeping of post-harvest cleaning and sanitizing practices. Number 2 was inadequate construction or maintenance of post-harvest buildings. 3 was inadequate or missing records of worker training. 4, inadequate toilet and or hand washing stations. And 5, inadequate worker health and hygiene training. So thinking about, risk, we've got a couple things here at the end that we see more risk involved there than actual record keeping. When we look at our farms in terms of, are they prepared for an inspection? So 34% of the farms that had a readiness review met the minimum standards of the rule. 58% needed minor improvements, and 8% needed significant improvements. So when we looked at the size of the operation based on produce sales and where it falls, so the largest of operations, 39% meet the standards, 51% needed minor improvements, and 10% it was indicated that they needed significant improvements. For the $250,000 to $500,000 size farms, 45% met the standards, 48% needed minor improvements, and 7% needed significant improvements. So it's interesting that there was a difference there with the size. Although that $250,000 to $500,000 range, that is generally a very much smaller number of farms, not just in the Northeast, but nationally. So it's a smaller category. When we get to the $25,000 to $250,000 mark, it drops down in terms of 25% for meets the standards, whereas the majority needed minor improvements with 70%, and the same was for those small operations that would be technically considered exempt from the rule at this point. When we look at what do farms in the Northeast need, number 1 was time, right? And a lot of the things on this category, it takes time to do, right? It takes time to get technical assistance, time to make facility upgrades, time to consider what you're going to throw money at to fix. And we know that states have different vantage points on answering this question too. So it's been interesting to visit different regions and see how people are answering this question. But as Betsy talked about earlier, technical assistance it's for every state. It's a need in the nation, not just in the Northeast. And I know personally we're not having a lot of questions after the readiness reviews, so farmers need the technical assistance, but the follow-through hasn't really been there unless they're cornering us after we've done a training or we see them at a meeting. When we look at how ready the farm is in terms of what the assistance is that they need, let's see. The biggest for time was those with making minor improvements. So my assumption there, right, is that it's small improvements, those minor improvements, they're things that they've come up with ideas on their own. They probably don't have to spend a ton of money on. It's a tweak. That's the greatest one there. When it comes to technical assistance, even the farms that meet the standards, there's a need for technical assistance. So it meant that not all the questions were answered when the readiness review happened, or the grower was considering making some more improvements at the farm and needed to consult with somebody as to the best direction to head in. But for farms that were needed minor changes or significant changes, it's 23% for that technical assistance. There's been some discussion about facility upgrades and money. Right, we were happy to see that significant monetary investment is pretty consistently lower than we thought based on what we were hearing from growers prior to understanding what the rule was going to look like. And so it's hard sometimes to differentiate if somebody puts down facility upgrade. Is that a significant investment? Right? If we're not writing things down, I just assumed they weren't checking off significant monetary investment, but there could be some confusion there. So it's important as your state teams to really look at the results of the survey and think about how the folks that are doing the readiness reviews and filling this out, what do they mean with each of the answers that they're putting into the survey. So some of the observations are not just large-scale producers are participating, and I think it's great that we've got even exempt farms who are interested. It means they're focused on food safety. It means they're hearing us, they're hearing the state in its promotion with readiness reviews and getting ready for the produce safety rule. It means they're hearing extension educators talking about reducing risk. Right, record keeping across the board is one of the biggest hurdles for the farms, as well as sanitation, which we've seen a lot of response from extension educators and creating programs and doing more hands-on workshops, which is great. A theme in the comments was that most or a considerable number of farms have not tested their water yet. It seems like a lot of farms are waiting until that part of the rule is finalized to start their water testing. And again, that technical assistance is recommended, but are the farms asking for it? So I think that's a room for improvement on the extension end, is how do we not hold hands, but give them that technical assistance. So states you're getting your state reports through NASDA. I generate the reports, they go to NASDA, and NASDA distributes them. I hear sometimes from folks who aren't receiving the reports. The reports are sent to the PI for the grant in your state. So if that's going to the wrong person or that person's inbox is a black hole, you need to talk to them. You need to talk to NASDA to make sure that you're getting the data that's specific to your state. The survey is an important part of the NASDA grant going forward. There will be reporting to the FDA and others on a regular basis. So there'll be more reporting on the survey results. And for those of you that have gone through the readiness review training, you'll be hearing us talk about this at Consortium, and there'll be another survey where we'll do a 1-year post-training survey. So I keep getting surveys to do. It's job security, I guess. But I'm always happy to answer questions. So if you have a question about the survey that you got or something with the survey, I'm happy to answer those questions. I do coordinate this very closely with NASDA. I am representing NASDA with doing the work. And so I have to get their go-ahead before I respond to some of the questions that I get.
Thanks, Meredith.
Thanks.
One or two quick questions, OFRR? Questions or comments on OFRR real quick? Steve? The question was timing of OFRR reports, and it's ahead of the CAP FDA reporting deadline by about a month, twice a year. Did I get there? Okay.
That frequency will change, though, going forward.
Okay, it's going to be changing.